And so we really focus on the sooner our people know what their personal purpose is, that should be a part of what you do every day. That is the link to really having people find meaning in their jobs. And so I think that that's critical. Just reflect on that.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations.
And today, I'm very excited to have time with maybe my first Shannon conversation, Shannon Schuyler. She's the PwC's U.S. Chief Purpose and Inclusion Officer, working to activate PwC's purpose to build trust in society and solve important problems and to create a fulfilling employee experience. Amen. She also serves in the firm's U.S. and Mexico climate risk leader. Responsible for furthering diversity, inclusion, and equity across the firm's workforce, she connects purpose with belonging to create an environment in the firm that celebrates identity and intersectionality as a way to drive innovation and business value. Thanks for being here, Shannon.
Thanks so much. And I love that two Shannons are doing this.
I know.
Never happens.
Wonder Twin Powers activate. Totally.
Go for it. I want to be the ice ladder. That was always, I know the water one was my favorite.
That makes me be the monkey, I think, but that's okay.
It does. I'm sorry. I jumped in.
All right. I would love to, obviously, people can check out your amazing bio online, but we would love to hear from you about your catalytic journey, maybe sharing a few career highlights that you're proud of to help us see your catalytic nature. And I would also love to hear about how you ended up with this title. I was looking at that online. It's such a fascinating story.
No, well, thanks so much. And so proud to be able to be on here and to talk to other catalysts on what they are doing. I have had a very winding journey. I've been at PwC for 29 years. I look to leave every 4. And instead of leaving, I end up trying something different at the organization. And so it was not the typical way that people get to partner in leadership. That's really follow the yellow brick road and it will get you there. Like I like to say that my path has been more of a climbing wall versus a ladder. I'm a little bit all over the place, but still trying to go up as I've done it. And so I'm a fixer, I've realized early on. I like to get in, I like to fix stuff, and then I like to move on. And then somebody else will make it better, but let me just try to fix it and do that. And so over the course of time, I have been a part of getting PwC on the Great Place to Work list for the first time, and now they're on it every single year. I wrote a white paper saying, I think we really should do corporate social responsibility, and sent it blindly to my CEO when I was a director. And lo and behold, he called and said, if you want to do it, good luck. And so with one person and a lot of dedication, we now have incredible things. We started to do our environmental sustainability. We started the PwC Charitable Foundation that started with $100,000, and now we're a $200 million giving foundation. We were the first organization to put out a transparency report for DE&I in our industry. We started CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. Now 2,500 CEOs are a part of that, and now we've just gifted it to SHRM. So like a lot of great things just based upon, like, if you see the white space, how can you get there fast and then build it, but then hand it on to somebody else who's going to make it better?
How do you handle that? Because like most catalysts, we can be it can be our baby, right? It's like, oh, I got this thing, and it's by definition going to change when you let it go into other people's hands. How do you navigate that?
You know, I think that there are days that you do take a step back and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Like, because this is what I wanted for that child. But I think it's also exciting to look back and say, gosh, when I started the firm, one of the first things that we did is a program with the Disney Institute, and we took our interns to Disney for the last week or so of the summer after they got their offer. We have now done that every single year. So we have now done it 28 years, and I've been there the majority of them. Where we started with the 200 interns and where we are now with the 5,000 interns, it's vastly different. But when I go there, I think about, oh yeah, what did I do in the first time? So I think it's just exciting to see how people take these things and they build something new, and you're a part of the legacy of it.
That's cool framing. How do you know when it's time to make that transition to hand it off?
I think it's when you got nothing new. I mean, I'm pretty honest with myself that if I'm kind of saying the same things over and over again, and you might have this, I have an incredible team, and they start to tell me when words are mentioned too often. Like if I'm saying, oh, and that's kind of when I know, wait, I'm talking about this in the same way every time. There's probably somebody else who's going to do it in a way that's going to take it to the next level because I'm kind of stuck where I am. I also think it's about always finding what is the next handle on your wall. Like you got to keep moving. And if you want to keep moving, to move, you got to let go of one hand in order to get the other one up. And so I think it also is forcing you to see what's next, because the more you can find out what's next, the more you want to leave behind what you had so you can get that next cool thing.
That's awesome. I love the intentionality and the rock climbing analogy. So I'm curious, like in your own words, how do you relate to the concept of catalyst? And I'm also curious how that intersects with being a catalyst and supporting you as an executive.
It's such a great question. And I think I've often said, which I looked at everything that you've done and I really saw the alignment as a constructive disruptor. Now, I think people were nice in putting constructive. I think sometimes I am just the disruptor, but I appreciate that, I take that. And then also have been called an impatient catalyst. So as a board member, kind of coined that. And of course, I take it as very positive, even though I know it can be looked at in both ways. But in wanting to get to the next place and wanting to get it for the institution, for the group, for the team, like feeling that if we can do that together, like let's figure out and let's push the limits to go there. And I think that has helped me have so many roles at the firm because there's always room to find the white space. You always have to find that place that others haven't gone there first. And I think to do that, you got to be willing to shake things up because, people like the status quo. And so to be able to be disruptive and to be impatient, in corporate America, it seems that, it's like, well, next year we'll do it different, right? Because you're in a cycle. And I'm like, I don't want to wait till next year. Like, can't we do it like that next month? Like, what would that look like? Could we start it? And so I think that's kind of led my career as well as what's fueled me to stay so interested in it.
It's such great advice, and I want to double click on it. Like one of my mottos is to live life without regret, but I do have a couple. And one of them is that I wasn't bigger or bolder or louder about some of the visions that I saw in organizations for where we could have taken it next time. I'm wondering if you have advice. Like you're like, so I wrote this sustainability paper and I sent it to the CEO. Like not everyone is going to do that. And that's not always welcome. So do you have advice for catalysts in terms of articulating the white space?
I think the most important thing that people can do is to realize what brings them meaning and what brings them purpose. I mean, I'm the first person to say that I honestly had no idea about what that even was until I got the role of Chief Purpose Officer. And then I was terrified that someone would be like, so what's your purpose? And I'll be like, I don't know, but the firm's purpose is to build trust in society and solve important problems. Like, isn't that enough? And I was terrified that people wouldn't think that I could do that unless I figured out, well, then how does your purpose actually align? Like, how do you work there? And so I went through a big kind of self-awareness of what is it and realized that I had kept these playing cards all these years. And it was because I came from a very matriarchal family. And every year the head woman would sit at the end of the table. And over the course of about 5 or 6 years, all those women passed away. And that happened when I was, in my 20s. And I carried those cards with me to remember each of them and what they did. But that was actually my purpose. I just didn't think about that until I was mid-40s. Had I have done that when I was early 20s, I would have made some different decisions. I would have made some more meaningful decisions. I would have been more thoughtful, more intentional. And so I think the sooner that people can say, what makes me tick? Like, what are the things? For me, it's to give a woman a voice, a woman who would come from a background of my mom being the first female state and local lobbyist, or a grandmother who started visiting nurses, or a grandmother, one of 12, who I never saw her without pantyhose, even it was 90 degrees. Like, these are amazing women who never got a chance to have a voice. Like, I have to live that for them. and make decisions that are a part of that. And so we really focus on the sooner our people know what their personal purpose is, that should be a part of what you do every day. That is the link to really having people find meaning in their jobs. And so I think that that's critical. Just reflect on that. Don't worry about sending the white paper in. Now I know why I wanted to do the white paper, because one of my badass relatives would have done it and I got to do it instead of them.
Amazing advice. All right. You've been in one organization for a long time. Being in large organizations is both exciting and challenging for Catalyst. I'm wondering if you can share one or two of the biggest challenges you've faced as a Catalyst leader, but also maybe how you overcame them. Also, we love success and failure stories. It's all welcome.
Oh, I'm telling you, I've learned way more from my failure stories. After I sent in my white paper to my CEO and he said, all right, give it a go, I had a presentation to our leadership team and it was bad. Like it was bad. It was so bad that after it, he was like, maybe I don't think this is going to work. Like maybe we shouldn't do corporate social responsibility. And in reflection, it was because I went to the table really with something that I thought was fully baked on why the organization should go down this path and why we should have these things that come together and why we shouldn't just give money and spread it like peanut butter, but have a reason and a meaning that people could coalesce behind. And I went in such my own little mindset that I didn't win anybody around the table. And now to this very day, we try to figure out, so what is the thing that each person has on their to-do list so they are successful to the CEO? What does that marketing person need? What does our legal person need? What does our comms person need? What does our HR person need? And let us be the lever to pull to make them successful. And it was, instead of saying like we all should come to the table and sing Kumbaya, like who cares if everyone's around there? They'll come for whatever reason they want, for this song over there or that one over there. As long as they're at the table, we can get things done. And I think for a while, I was too holier than thou, than I know why we should be there. And again, when I realized that, no, and I let it go. Like I realized that people go to different things and it can be because their brain tells them to. It could be because their heart tells them to, or it could be because their pocketbook tells them to. And I don't really care why now, just that they go. But that takes a while to kind of get used to that feeling.
It's fascinating. How it's not easy to, I mean, there's one thing where you can see people's KPIs and the objectives. I'm guessing though at the intersection of CSR, you have to look a little bit differently at what those things are. How do you have advice to Catalyst for how to understand what those wins are for the people that you want to get to the table?
It's such a great question. And I would say that whatever you do, and so just taking it now in the notion of ESG or those areas, people like to say that you can't monetize it and that you can't, how do you put a number on somebody engaged or someone feeling meaningful? And I would argue that in this day and age, if you can't put a dollar sign next to it and a couple pieces of data, don't do it, because you don't belong at the table then, because the table means we're putting things on here that are very concrete, that are either advantageous or a risk at the organization. And this is why we have to put this towards it to make that investment. If you come and you say, it's the right thing to do, no, our people will really like it. Well, do they really? Like, is that true or not? Do our clients care or not? Do our regulators care or not? You got to actually be able to play in the same field as others do on tangible business issues, or else you don't belong there. And so I think it's whatever you do, you have to tell the strongest business case that needs to be a part of data and needs to have a case study on why this works and for which stakeholder in order to be viable.
I agree completely. And there's this challenge for Catalyst often where like the case study hasn't been written yet because we haven't done it yet. Like we're trying net new things where there just might not be the historical data in the ways that there are for other business opportunities. How have you navigated that complexity?
I would say, and it's like the business case for D&I, right? I mean, everyone can be like, here, we had a business case for D&I, and it has monetary and this we get. But to be clear, if that was actually believed by leadership teams and by boards, we would have done it. And we would have fundamentally been in a different place around D&I than we are. So the business case has to actually be something that translates within that organization. So I actually think we're better off coming without one. So you have to create one based upon what is there today, not the business case is because, this many years ago, this consulting firm did this and said that nobody cares. So you need to look at now. And seriously, like now we are past COVID, we had just had an election. So now, why is it important to do? And I think it's easier if you're not hoping that you got some data from 2018 that now doesn't matter at all of what will work and what won't work.
Yeah, I love the timeliness and the contextualization invitation there. Are there other challenges that you've encountered as a Catalyst exec in driving change in large orgs?
I think it's getting out of your own way. I think you can charge so hard and you can see it so clearly, but you can't do it alone. So you gotta get people on board to go it with you, which means you might need to slow it down a bit or alternate it, because the way you think and the way to get there, I sometimes think that my team must know through osmosis, because I can tell when I'm talking to them, I'm missing like 10 words, right? And either I've worked with them long enough, they're like, oh, we know the words, or she can't spell. But we can read between the lines of what she means. But then the poor folks who are new to the team are like, okay, that's crazy. Like, I don't even know what that is. So you have to make sure that you're communicating in a way that everybody understands. And that might mean you need to change the way you communicate. That might mean you have to listen a little harder. That might mean you can't worry as much about something being shut down when it's not shut down yet. And so over the last couple of years, I've really been focused on stoicism as a way to control your emotions. Because I do get ahead of myself. And I think it's the worst possible thing that could happen. It never happens, but it's the thing that I think about all the time. And I think that's been really helpful to slow it a bit. And I do think that as we look at the generations at our firm and others, people are more thoughtful. And as a Gen Xer, I have a lot to learn in order to make sure that I do that better.
Spot on. And I would love to geek out with you about stoicism and the intersection of creating change. I'm with you there. It's so fascinating though, because you're right. Our speed, especially as Catalyst leaders, the synapses that we can just sort of skip. How do you evaluate when people are actually understanding you? Because I know I've been in the room when there's a lot of like shaking of the head and it seems like they agree and all of that. But then at some point you're like, oh, they didn't really understand. The message wasn't getting through.
I think that it's really making sure that you're showing how they demonstrate it. So one, I think making them, so what do you think that means? How would you say it in your own words, right? Getting them to be able to say it so you can understand, did they get kind of some of it or not others? And then being a part of their journey. Like it shouldn't be like you're on high and you're like, oh, these are the great things you should do. You suddenly need to be a bedfellow with them to say, no, let me do it with you. Like, let me see how that works so that I understand what might need to pivot as far as that communication on it. And so making sure that you're now in it with them versus just hoping that they got it. And then they go off and they didn't want to ask the 2 questions more to really find out what you were saying. And so you got to go with every lead that you have so that you can help them to be able to morph it into what makes sense for their group and to really have an appreciation that they understood just the basic framework of it. And now it's, okay, how are they going to build it? And plus that's really exciting because it's exciting to see how one leader takes it and makes it look different, even though the framework is the same. Like that's exciting and something to learn from.
Totally. What I hear though, when you talk about this is the amount of emotional labor that we have to do as catalysts. And often, we talk about this in the book, like burnout is real, that there's a lot of empathy and listening and self-management and others management. How do you maintain your energy as a catalyst leader doing all of that?
It's such a great question. And I really am interested in this notion of continually learning. One of the things that I've done for years is every other week I send about 20 articles to the team. I'm like, oh, in your copious free time, I want to look at this, and many of them don't, or maybe they find one, but I'm just fascinated with how much knowledge, how much changes. Like that excites me over how to look at something different. What does AI mean? Like how is that going to impact these things? And I think that allows your world to continue to grow and the conversations that you have and really being intellectually curious over all the different tentacles. I just got done taking an MIT course around sustainability after I've led sustainability for 15 years. And I was fascinated. I was like, okay, I never looked at it in that way and wanted to be able to do that. And so I think people need to push themselves beyond what they're looking at every day and to find those things that really excite them. And kind of the next thing I've always said, have your job right now, but start looking for what's next. And the only way to find out what's next is you figure out what are the 3 or 4 other things you're interested in and how you might then get to that place. And then I do believe that burnout is real. And I think you have to recognize when it's you, because you're typically the last one to know. And then go back to, okay, what is recharging? There's a great kind of cartoon that's out there. And I carry it around, and it's the elephant, and the elephant says, and elephants are my spirit animal. I don't know why. And it's, I must rest, my rampage is over. And I kind of realized, here's my little one, that I realized that, okay, let's put a pin in it. Like you've
Yes.
gone as far as you can. Let's rest on that one. We'll figure out what's next, but you got at some point, you got to say, all right, I knocked this one as far as I can out of the park. And now let's regroup and figure out what's the next one to try.
Have you identified like earlier warning signals instead of like, for me, it was like, I'd be like almost sick in the hospital, 15 years ago. And now it's like, I'm starting to get ahead of it a little bit. Do you have early warning signs for you around burnout?
I do. For me, it's, I can't stop. I can't turn it off. Like I can't. And so whether it's, easily way after the time it takes to get home, but I can't. It's like, I can't in the evenings. I can't on the weekends. I can't sleep through the night because it just has consumed me. And I have a 12-year-old son, and then he starts like saying the words, and I realize, oh my God, I'm talking about that way too much. Like he's like, so I can't believe the inclusion of blah. And I'm like, okay, I gotta stop. Because there's no reason that at 12, he should have to be a part of this crazy dialogue and quoting it back to me and say, so why are you so upset about that? I'm like, all right, I'm gonna turn that off. My dogs, if I'm working from home, usually are underneath my desk. And they also, if I get to a tone, like there's a pitch, and then they kind of start howling, and I'm like, that's bad. It's very bad. If I get there, that means you've gone over the deep end and it's time to sit back and figure it out and stop.
I love that the humans and the animals around you are mirrors. That's really brilliant.
Totally.
But it's really smart.
Can't just be you. It has to be others. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering, there's a theme that we've been hearing a lot. So I wanted to tap into maybe some other pearls of wisdom, not just maybe challenges. And feel free to take this wherever you want. But one of the things that we're hearing a lot is organizations are being asked to do more with less. And this does connect with burnout, but it also becomes really hard for the change agents who are trying to create new things because, now the priorities are even more focused. Getting through the noise is really hard. Have you been seeing that? And do you have advice for Catalyst in that situation?
It's such a great thing to reflect on. My job was so much easier when there was like 2 of us, right? So when there was 2 of us and you had no money, you could only do what you could do, and you had to make it really meaningful, and you had to really leverage where the other money and the other people are. And so you knew there was a lot more people that were sitting within human capital or recruiting. There was a lot more people who sat in marketing and comms. There was a lot more people who sat in finance. So the more that you could connect the dots back to an organization within the firm that actually had resources and money, the more you could get things done on their back of doing it. And I think then suddenly when you have all the people and you have all the money, I think sometimes it becomes a little harder because you're forgetting that we can create it, but they might not come. And you can't just create it in your vacuum of this is something great because it might not be. And you really should have gotten those 5 stakeholders to do it. And you know they'll really do it when they give you the budget to do it. And that actually works better. When you think, I got all the money and the resources, we'll just launch it and suddenly someone will come. It actually doesn't work like that. And so I would tell people that some of that is a gift. The money, people aren't motivated by how much money you spent on a campaign for them to get engaged and feel like pro bono, giving, green, picket, and the universe that I'm part of is important. That's a personal. And the people who aren't going to be able to get there because their heart takes them there, you're going to get there because their mind takes them there or because their client wants to do it. And so it's back to saying it's the psychology of it. It's not the dollars of it. And I think we all can take that as it's okay if there's fewer people and it's okay if there's less money, but that means that you have to work on a behavioral shift that frankly is harder, but that's more sustainable once you get it.
You're making me want to like write a paper on that. It's such a good reframe. It really is such a good reframe. And it's such a good opportunity for Catalyst, like both when I was doing the innovation program, but even our Catalyst programs now, when people get like accepted into the program and they're starting to think about the big juicy problems, one of the first questions in our first Q&A is, okay, what's our budget? And I'm like, you have no budget. You have no budget. You have to go find the things that people give a shit around the organization and make them care so that they're using their resources, which in the end makes you much more successful. Totally. And you'll find out really quick. If there's no there, find the next thing. Super smart.
Right. Because I'm like, you guys, if they don't buy it, that means they don't like it.
Totally.
So we can do all we can to build this course for this, and it's sparkly and shiny, and the location is great, but they got to buy it. And if they don't want to buy it, then whatever we created in the budget that we had clearly doesn't matter because they're not going to go. But that, I mean, I think it's really good intentioned people who, again, going back to my first example of, I built it because I thought people would come. Well, but that's not how it actually happens. Like you have to let them tell you what they will come for and then build it in that direction. And it's amazing that it's not all money. It's not all money. It really isn't.
Yeah, it's such a good lesson. Are there other trends that you're seeing that might be impacting catalysts in sort of this crazy spiral of disruption and change on a sort of macro level?
I really think that catalysts need to look at all the levers that are in their sphere of influence or are tangential to that sphere of influence, because you have to realize that you want to pull different levers at different times. Like if we go through an election and something's happening and suddenly like people don't want to talk about D&I the most. Okay, so what do they want to talk about? They want to talk about the economy. Okay, so let's pull on that one. Okay, let's pull on climate. Like let's look at what is working. And if you have a lot of things across the portfolio, you want to be in the position to say, all right, that one can go up, but now I can pull on this. And if you're only focused on one thing and you only think you have one answer for one thing, that's going to jam you. You got to make sure that your portfolio, even across something that is in one area, you gotta give yourself some room because you can't die on the vine. If you can't pull that lever, then what happens to you? Nothing good. So you got to really look at all the different ways to get there. And I think one of the things that catalysts are really good at is they're not just one trick ponies, right? They're like, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. Well, get ready to figure out, all right, this one's not going to work as much. So what one are you going to go after? And I think that that's something that catalysts are really good at, but they need to stay on their toes and figure out what those are. And that allows them to continue to be nimble and looking for different ways out versus saying there's one way, which, is never going to be good if that one happens to not go in your way.
Yeah, I want to write an article about that too. So thank you for that.
Me too.
Yeah, no, I think the portfolio approach, it's funny because, when we do these podcasts, sometimes we hear themes like on a daily or weekly basis. And I think that portfolio view is really important right now. And it's coming out loud and clear because there's so much disruption. You don't know, we're adaptive, but we don't know which ones are going to change in the, drop of a hat. So I really love that. Thank you. All right.
And I think that goes back to just being intellectually curious. Like you got to figure out what is the next thing before it's the next thing. Because you want to be when a conversation suddenly you walk into a room and people are like, you know what, I'm sick of talking about this. Let's talk about this. You got to know what this is because you continue to read and to understand and to say, okay, so what is that next thing people are talking about? And you want to at least read enough to answer the first two questions. The third, you'll just go, oh my gosh, yes, I'm gonna have to look at that and go back and research more, but you got to be in the know of those upcoming trends and be ready to be a part of that conversation just for two questions. That's all you got to do. And then you can go back and learn more based upon where the conversation went.
How do you carve out specific time to do that? It is such an important thing. Like, how do you keep your finger on the pulse of what's emergent in your world?
I do. So I have this like an article pile that is just like everything goes here. And unfortunately, I do still print it out. And then I find if I'm on a plane or on the weekends or like then I start going through the pile and then you're like, oh, that one isn't going to get me anywhere. But then there's some that are really interesting. And they also prompt me to reach out to a leader that maybe I wasn't thinking about to say, oh my gosh, did you read this? Like, I think you're the one who introduced me to this theory. Like, what do you think about it? And it's a way to continue to build your network. It forces you to say, all right, who knows more about this? And I'm going to keep reaching out to then that person. So it's both a network expander as well as really a mind expander of the way in the world and how people are looking at things and really good conversation starters. But, we all have the free time when you're looking at those things. And so that's when I take the opportunity to breeze through an article and go, huh, like that made me think. Who else can I send this to make them think?
Nice. Okay, actually, I decided to add one more question before the fun final question, because you have multiple times, it sounds like, pitched creating a new role for where society was, you were, the organization is. That's a great opportunity when catalysts get to do that. I'm just wondering if you have any advice on what worked going through that process and what didn't work.
No, it's a great question. I think what has worked is saying, this is the white space. This is how I'm going to measure it. And this is why it's going to be meaningful to the organization's top stakeholders. And be able to put some meat on that kind of framework to show that it's real. And as well as to say, and listen, I will do this. I will do it for no more money. I don't need any resources. Let me just prove it. Let me prove it. And it might prove it that it's a no-go, or I might be able to prove that this is actually something there, and then we can talk about how it would get resourced. And so I think going in it with also, you got to figure out if it's going to work or not. And I think some of that is we have to be really candid with ourselves. Like there have been great programs that I think from a meaningful standpoint, and I think even from those individuals who have gone through it standpoint, were really solid. But if I'm real, it didn't advance the organization. Those people didn't stay any longer. We can't tie any of it to a return on investment. And we got to just cut it. And you need to own that side too. And I think a lot of times we don't want to do that. But the faster we can say, I tested it, I tried it, and you know what? There really isn't any there. I liked it. And cut it. That really makes sure that that's what a business does. Business tries it. If it doesn't work, they say, let it go. They emotionally don't get tied to it. And I think that's something that we have to be really focused on doing, because catalysts like to build and like to create. But then you have to be equally as look in the mirror. Does it really work? If it doesn't, if you are the one to say, I really like this, I really thought it would work, I'm also going to be the one who pulls its plug.
Totally.
That means something.
And it can be so hard for us. It's like, the couple, I mean, more than one, but some of the times that I ran into the biggest challenges were when my ego or identity or something became tied to the thing that I was working on. And I couldn't be objective enough to just say like, either let it go or take the feedback or pivot or whatever. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. All right. Final fun question. Who's your favorite famous catalyst that inspires you, past or present, and why?
I love this question. And it's one that I think, depending upon the day, it might be somebody different. But Ariana Huffington,
Yes.
I have to say, I have had a girl crush on her for a very long time.
Yeah.
And she always is reinventing herself and the way that she looks at things. And she has a great quote that's the most important thing for achievers is to study the science of achieving. And I love that because you have to figure out, why are you like that? As a catalyst, why are you like that? What is the way that made you that? Because we actually have to figure that out and let others do the same. And I just have been so impressed with how she has looked at meaning, more recently, how she's looked at mental health, but she has reinvented herself in so many different ways. And I just am overwhelmed with what she has been able to do, and how she has looked at her career, her personal reason for being there, and her purpose, that I just think that she's one of the coolest catalysts out there.
Amen. I totally agree. I have the girl crush on her too. Like she's been just such a trailblazer. It's really amazing.
No,
Yeah. We stand on the shoulders of giants like her.
we do. And you just look from afar and I'm like, oh my God, you're so cool. But gosh, very inspiring.
Shannon, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us today. It was fascinating.
Well, it has been amazing to be with you, Shannon. So very much looking forward to it again.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout, or go to the website at catalystconstellations.com. And if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, I'm a total fangirl now, please take 10 seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And of course, if you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.